Welcome to the third annual virtual Aquaponic Cannabis Conference. Please support these companies. They took the time to educate us during this conference.
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
So sorry about that, everybody. My name is Danielle Maitland. I'm the Director of Science and Cultivation Technology at Aqualitas Inc. And I am also a PhD student at Dalhousie University. And I'm going to talk to you about a few different things today. So I'm going to talk about the literature review project I worked on last year, how I did this literature search, how the spreadsheet turned out, some recommended uses and some cautions when using it. I believe that Aquaponics there is going to pop the link for that spreadsheet up in the chat. And if not, I can try and put it in later. I'm going to talk a little bit about some analysis I did on that spreadsheet and talk about methodological reporting in aquaponics literature, specifically, how it was assessed, how the different inputs were reported, who's using what in the literature, and why it matters that you report what you're using when you're doing a kind of a scientific study. I'm going to talk very briefly about some of the research I've been working on for my PhD, which is developing an aquaponics fish feed. I wouldn't have had this ready if the conference had happened in the fall, but you gave me enough time to do a little bit of data analysis, so I have that now. And then I'm going to do my my plug for Aqualitas and Reef Organic there at the end. And then any questions I'm happy to answer. So why did I go about making a big spreadsheet? So for my PhD project, I was focusing on developing an aquaponic fish feed. And so I figured I'd go through all the literature and I collect data on what other people were using in literature, because there weren't really too many articles about improving plant growth by changing the diet of your fish. So I figured I'd just go through all the articles and I'd collect all this information about, the type of feed they were using, where they were getting it, how much protein was in it, how much salt was in it. And I'd try and analyze that data set and get something useful out of it. And so that was going to be for my comprehensive exam. And then as I started filling out the spreadsheet, I was like, oh, well, I should put in the title of the paper and the authors and the year it was published. And I should also put in how big the system was and what kind of fish they were using. And so the spreadsheet just kept ballooning and ballooning and ballooning. And eventually I ended up with about 350 publications. And I was pulling data from each of those publications on about 68 different parameters. So I did pass my comprehensive exam, which is great. And I've written one review paper based on this data set, which I'm going to talk about. That's the inputs reporting that I talk about later. And so I decided to share the tool, the literature review tool, just as hopefully a useful thing for the aquaponics community if they're looking to get more information about the published articles that are out there. So I did the review on May 7th. 2021, so anything published after that isn't in the spreadsheet yet. And basically I went on Web of Science, I typed in aquaponic and aquaponics, and that gave me 297 results. So I downloaded all those papers, and then as I was reading through them, if they referenced something that I hadn't downloaded already, I downloaded that reference as well and included it in the spreadsheet. If something was behind a paywall, I didn't include it because I couldn't get it, but I ended up with 359 publications, and that includes review papers, experimental articles, extension publications, all sorts of published work on aquaponics. So the recommended uses for this spreadsheet, which I'll show you, I'll go through it just a little bit in a minute and hopefully don't get any more technical difficulties, it's good for a literature search. If you want to see what's been published about koi in aquaponics or cannabis in aquaponics, you can search the fish tab or the plant tab, and it'll kind of give you a list of articles you can look up if you are interested in that plant species or that fish species. If you want a list of review articles, we can do that. It's good to compare results from literature to your system if you can find a system in there that is similar to yours, maybe growing the same types of plants, the same types of fish, and winning arguments with your friends and colleagues is always fun. I would advise against using the sheet for any math as is. So don't, go and say the average pH of an aquaponic system is, and then try and average that pH tab. It is, some of it is numbers, but some of it is also ranges, if that was what was provided in the article. So it will mess with Excel if you try and do math on cells like that. So if you have any questions, if you are confused by an entry, or if I got something wrong, because I'm almost definitely did get something wrong, you can send me an email. I have that a little later in the presentation. So I'm going to try and share the literature review spreadsheet here now. Is that coming through okay?
Yeah, sure is.
So this is the spreadsheet. It goes in reverse chronological order. So it starts up here in 2021 and it goes all the way down to 1977 and 1978, which is the two first articles that were published about aquaponics. Those were recirculating aquaculture people who were looking to add an extra biofilter so they could circulate their water for longer, because the nitrogen was getting taken out of the water by the plants. So anything that's grayed out is a review article. So obviously those generally don't have systems involved, so they don't have any system parameters. But if you just scroll along, the publication, the authors, any associations of the authors, where the article or the research was done, what type of aquatic animal was used. So that's probably going to be, anyway. So you can filter these columns and get, a list of articles that are just experimental, or just review articles, or just use koi, just use cannabis, just use NFT or DWC or media based. You can sort each of these. You can sort by light type. You can sort by environment, and then I just go through the different spacings, pH, temperature of the fish tank, all the food factors, which is what the spreadsheet was originally about, was all the protein, fat content, fiber content in the fish feed. I have a section on inlet water parameters, and then ammonia, nitrate, and nitrite, and phosphate if they're reported, and then a quick line there at the end about the conclusions that the author came to in the paper. So hopefully it's useful. Hopefully we get people can use it to search and find things that are useful for them. That's the intent behind it anyway. And let's go back to the PowerPoint. So once you have this, what do you do with it? It's hopefully this is not showing you presenter view, because it's looking different to me, but regardless, I don't think I have many notes. So you can access the data through the Aquaponics Association site. And hopefully there will be a link provided in the chat. I am going to try to update it yearly. If that doesn't work out, we'll know. It originally, I had it written down that it was going to be shared monthly, and then it was quarterly, and now I have it. I'm going to try and update it yearly. So I'm trying to temper expectations with the yearly. I do have all the next up to the end of 2022, all the articles downloaded. I just have to go through them and add them to the spreadsheet. It's fairly time intensive. So I haven't done that yet. And I will keep an archive of a previous version. So if you're looking for a previous version down the line in a few years, I can send that to you. That's the email address that you can contact me at. If anything is wrong or needs to be updated, go ahead. So what do you do with the giant spreadsheet? So what I did was I narrowed it down, and I did a lot of analysis on it. So I narrowed it down to articles that had physical systems, and they had to include fish and plants. So of those 359 publications, 231 had fish in a tank connected to plants that they were growing. And I wanted to analyze this data set to see how often were people specifying what they were using for inputs when they were doing these research projects. Were they saying which fish feed they were using, what makeup water they were using, what buffer they were using, and what type of light they were using? And I did look at fish and plants a little bit, but those were very well reported. So what input was used and how much of it were they using were the questions I was looking at. And so for plants and fish, they were very well reported. So I didn't really thoroughly analyze these as much, but generally speaking, 100% of the articles specified what fish they were using, and 99% of the articles specified what plants they were using. Tilapia was the most common in the literature, followed by carp, followed by catfish, followed by ornamentals. There was no salmon in the literature. There was also no sunfish or no bluegill, which are commercial species. If you look at some of the surveys of aquaponics practitioners, those are things that people are growing commercially, but they don't show up in the literature. For plant species, about 45% of the article said what plant species they were using in the title of the article. And the most common were lettuce, followed by tomatoes, followed by basil. There's very little cannabis, unfortunately, in the published literature so far. Just 1.3%, I think, is 2 articles. And 40% of those articles had more than one plant species in the article. So I didn't assess if they were specifying where they were getting these plants or how much of these plants they were putting in, but I did look at that for the, or fish as well, but I did look at that for the other inputs. So for makeup water, I wanted the article to consider, or to say that they specified it. I just wanted to say where they were getting it from. Was it rainwater? Was it well water? Was it municipal water? And then for the amount used, I wanted to know either the amount of makeup water they used over the course of the study, or every day, percent per makeup water per day, some kind of estimation of that. For buffer, for pH control, I wanted to know what type of agent was used, or if they didn't need to use one. And then for the amount, either the pH range they were trying to target or the amount in grams that they were using either per day or over the course of the study. For lighting, I wanted to know the type of light. So was it just sunlight, or was it sunlight plus supplemental lighting, or was it just supplemental lighting? And for the amount used for sunlight, if they stated the dates of the study and where they were, that's enough to figure out, photoperiod and light intensity, or specifically stating light intensity and the dates or the photoperiod would be considered enough information, at least for this analysis. And then for artificial lighting, the photoperiod and light intensity are optimal, but if they provided the photoperiod, the type of lighting they were using, and the wattage of that light, I accepted that as well. And then if they were using both sunlight and artificial lighting, I wanted them to provide details on both types of light. And then for fish feed, it was the brand name or the source of the feed. So, it was Purina Aquamax, or it was a self-formulated feed. And then for amount, it was either body weight percent per day or the total amount used over the experiment, just an estimation of how much food was being, or a reporting of how much food was being put into the system. So when I looked at these 231 articles for the makeup water, and that's the water that's usually initially used to fill the system, to replace water that's lost to transpiration, to evaporation, to harvests, you have leaks, you have solids removal, and then you have spillage. So that the makeup water generally in literature range around 5% per day. But there are no published articles in the literature before 2021 that I found that specifically looked at the impact of makeup water on system performance, which is unfortunate. But the common sources were municipal and tap water, well and groundwater, surface water, rainwater, and distilled reverse osmosis or deionized water. Of the 231 articles, 91 said what water source they were using. So about 40% of the articles, and only 46 of those specified how much of makeup water they were using. And fewer than 8% of all the articles reported the pH, electrical conductivity, or temperature of the makeup water they were using. For the most part, the researchers were using municipal and groundwater, a little bit of RO or distilled water for the articles that were focused on nutrient flows, and they didn't want to be introducing any new nutrients through their makeup water, a little bit of rainwater, and a little bit of surface water. When you look at the buffer used, This is required to counteract the pH drop as your biofilter converts ammonia to nitrate. It's not always required. So if you have a really, really high alkalinity makeup water, or if you're using a grow medium that can act as a buffer, or if your study is just a really short duration, you might not need to use a buffer to control pH, but generally it is needed. And there is one article that's been published that looks at the impact of buffer on system operation. That's from Wilson Leonard and was published in 2020. And he did find a difference, like there was improved plant growth with specific types of buffers. So it does have an impact on your system performance, what type of buffer you're using. 82 of the 231 articles specified what buffer they were using, or if they weren't using a buffer. And of those, 76 specified what their target pH range was, or how much buffer they were using. For light, I was looking at sunlight only, sunlight plus supplemental lighting, or artificial lighting only. 3 articles have been published on the impact of lighting. They're listed there. And of the 231, 197 specified a light source, which is 85%, which is pretty good. And of those 197, 123 specified the amount. With only about a quarter saying using like a light meter to give an actual measurement, but a lot of them did provide the dates and the location of the study. The majority of articles were looking at sunlight only as the lighting. 75% were just greenhouses or outdoors with no supplemental lighting. About 13% used sunlight and supplemental lighting. Most of that was HPS in the literature, followed by LED and metal halide. And then only 12% of articles were looking at artificial only lighting. And for that, the most common was fluorescent, followed by LED, followed by metal halide, followed by HPS. For fish feed, depending who you talk to, 50 to 80% of the nutrients for plant growth should be coming from the waste nutrients from aquatic animal production. So the fish feed should be your major nutrient source in aquaponics. And there are 8 different articles looking at changing the feed parameters around a little to try and improve plant growth or fish growth. But they did have some limited statistically significant results. Of the 231 articles, 112 specified where they got their feed from. 42 articles just said they were using a commercial feed without providing any other details. And 78 of those articles specified the amount. So about a third of articles are saying where they're getting their fish feed and how much fish feed they're using for aquaponics articles. Of the ones that specified a feed source, mostly everyone was using commercially available complete pelleted feeds. There was a few people who reported using homemade feeds, some using flakes and wafers, some were growing using biofloc. There was one article that was using dried honeybee larvae and one that was feeding live tilapia. So of the secondary characteristics of the feed, about 64% of articles reported how much protein was in their feed. 63 reported the feeding frequency. So were they feeding once a day, twice a day, 3 times a day? And then it dropped off from there with fewer articles reporting the fat content or the fiber content. And only about 1 in 5 articles reported the amount of phosphorus they were using or that there was present in their fish feed. So overall, the graph on the left is the number of input sources that were specified. So there's 4 inputs: fish feed, buffer, light, and makeup water. And so only 13% of articles specified all 4 inputs. And then when you look at the inputs and amounts, only 5.6% of all the articles surveyed reported both the input they were using and how much of each input they were using. So this is just by input. And again, you see a bit of a drop for each one from when some more articles specify what they're using than how much they're using. So what does that matter? So overall, about 66% did not report 2 or more sources for their study, and 82% didn't report the sources and amounts of 2 or more of their inputs. And so that means that the minimum standards I set up at the start of the presentation weren't met for makeup water 80% of the time, buffer and fish feed for about 2/3 of the time, and lighting for about 50% of the time. And this isn't the first time there have been issues noticed with the aquaponics literature. Wilson Leonard put a publication out in 2020, looked and found that about 61% of the articles that he surveyed applied no or incorrect statistical analysis. And there was a more recent publication by Colt in 2021 that found that about 72% of the articles surveyed didn't sufficiently report the engineering or design aspects. So if the literature doesn't include these information in the articles, it makes it really difficult to build upon the work. You can't, replicate a study or continue a study on if you don't have enough information on what's being used, how much is being used, and how these studies are being designed. And now a lot of people don't really try to replicate studies. There were no studies that I saw in the literature review spreadsheet that were direct replications. But if if commercial producers want to use these studies, they need to know how generalizable the study is to them. How similar is the system that was being studied to their system? So for makeup water, because there aren't any studies out there on the impact of makeup water, it's really hard to tell what, do you get better yield if you're using well water or if you're using municipal water? Is this study that uses municipal water applicable to my grow that's using well water? And if the study provided all the details on the water, you might be able to make an assessment how close it is to your water, what might the differences be. But if that information isn't provided, it can't be used. And when it comes to the buffer, there has been at least one study showing that it can have an impact. So it is important which buffer is being used. You might have two articles. One says that you need to supplement potassium in aquaponics, and one says that you don't. But the one that says you don't is using potassium bicarbonate as their buffer, but they never mention that in their materials and methods section. So it's hard to draw conclusions. It's hard to take that information and apply it in a useful way to your system, your study, your commercial operation if it's not provided in literature. Lighting was pretty well reported. At least the type of light that was used was pretty well reported. But lighting can have a really big impact on operational costs and yields and starting costs if you have to buy all these lights. So it is important to be able to have that information if you want to use the literature that's out there to inform your decisions. And in terms of fish feed, the results from the studies have been mixed. There's not a lot of information out there on whether the fish feed use has a huge impact on plant growth. There is a lot of literature in the aquaculture generally that says that you can improve fish feed, or you can improve fish growth with improved feed. But in terms of the impact on the plants, it is the literature so far is fairly mixed. But feed characteristics in the literature and in generally, they vary really widely. You can get a low protein feed, that's 20% protein all the way up to a carnivore feed that's 65% protein. So it's not like you can go into a research article that doesn't state what type of protein or what type of fish feed they're using and make an assumption, because there's such a wide variety available that you can't really do that. And this becomes an issue when trying to design systems or model systems, because the protein content of the fish feed and the phosphorus content of the fish feed are really critical for sizing your systems and for sizing your biofilter, for sizing your solids removal, for sizing how much phosphorus are you going to have in your water to be available for plants. So it is important to include this information whenever possible. I'm working on a slightly prettier version of this to hopefully post, but generally speaking, for makeup water, state where your source is. If it's from a municipality, provide the location. If it's a well, what type of well is it? Is it drilled or is it dug? And where is it from? And then if you're using RO or distilled water, what machine did you use or where did you get it from? And then just the total amount used either over the course of the study or per day. Similar for buffer, what are you using? If you're not using it, say why. if you are using it, say where you got it from and what the chemical formula is. And then for the amount used, ideally you'd say, this many grams per day or this many grams total, and then include the pH range you were aiming for when you were adding your buffer. For lighting type, again, type of light, sunlight and or artificial. And if you're using artificial, what type of light is it? What is the wattage of the bulb? Where did you get it from? For lighting intensity, again, photo period and intensity are the main ones, and they vary differently can vary slightly for sunlight or artificial, but that's the main point. How much light what intensity of light are they getting in for how many hours a day are the plants seeing that light? And for fish feed, the manufacturer, brand name, and source of the feed, and then if it has if that brand name of feed is available in a variety of pellet sizes, say which pellet size you were using. And then for the total amount, you can say percent per day, percent body weight per day, or grams per day of fish feed, and then how frequently were you feeding them. If any food is being removed, you should also include that in there as well, because that'll affect the nutrient content. And then in a perfect world, everyone would have infinite funding and they'd be able to spend a lot of money on water testing. I know that's not always the case, but including things like the pH and electrical conductivity and temperature of your makeup water is really good. If you're using, especially if you're using well water, testing for the nutrients and reporting that is important. For example, my well water has more manganese in it than you would ever see in the strongest hydroponic, fertilizers. So that might, if I'm growing aquaponically using that water, that could affect other nutrient input or other nutrient uptake by the plants. It's important to include that information. Ideally, if you can measure light, if you have a power meter or something that can give you ppfd, if you can measure that a couple times over the course of the experiment and report it, that's great. And for fish feed, if you're buying it commercially, it'll have generally what's called guaranteed minimum analysis, and that'll say the minimum amount of protein in your fish feed. Phosphorus is often included. Sometimes you'll get sodium. So just report what's on the fish feed bag at least. And if you can get approximate analysis done, I know a lot of agricultural labs will do this. You send them a sample of feed and they'll run it through and they'll tell you, how much protein, fat, moisture, ash, and fiber is in there. You can also sometimes add on, macro elements and micronutrients into that testing as well. So this is the new stuff. I've never talked to anybody about this. So this is a Aquaponics exclusive. For my PhD with Aqualitas, I'm working on developing an aquaponics specific fish feed. So what we did is we compared a commercial koi feed to two different feeds we designed. And one was designed more thinking about the vegetative growth phase of cannabis, and one was designed looking more at the flowering feed phase of cannabis. And so we made the feeds and we tested them in triplicate. So that's the first data I'll go over. And then we use this contraption here, which is, we call it the feed trial unit. And it's a series of tanks, basically a very small scale RAS system. It has a couple clarifiers, biofilter, heating and chilling, and then municipal makeup water to top it up. And with this unit, we did 3-week nutrient generation trials for each type of food. And we also did one 12-week feed trial where we had 3 tanks, each getting a different type of food, or 3 tanks getting each type of food. So there's 9 tanks total. And we grew them in the same environment, head-to-head, just looking at how did the fish grow on each of these, the koi grow on each of these feeds. And because I just complained about nobody specifying their inputs, for the record, I used 3 fish feeds. The nutrient information is going to be on the next slide. I used municipal water that was dechlorinated from the municipality Aqualitas is located in, which is Brooklyn. We were using potassium bicarbonate as a buffer, and we didn't have any lights because we didn't have any plants. The point of this trial was to look at fish growth and nutrient generation. So getting into the fish feed, we had similar protein levels. So the different letters, if the letters are different between columns, that means that they are statistically significantly different. So for example, for nitrogen, the commercial feed and the vegetative feed had about the same amount of nitrogen, and the flowering feed had more protein. Phosphorus was different, and it increased significantly from the commercial diet through the vegetative diet through the flowering diet. Potassium was different, and it did decrease a little bit. Potassium is generally not very high in fish feed because fish generally don't need a lot of potassium as a nutrient in their diets. So you'll always see much lower potassium in fish feeds than generally you will see in phosphorus and nitrogen. Calcium increased as the phosphorus increased and was significantly different. Not a lot of huge difference in the magnesium levels. The sodium level in the commercial feed was significantly higher than in the feeds that we developed. And fat was fairly low. It was usually for koi, you want it fairly low because they can get some health issues if there's too much fat in their fish food. So looking at how that translated over, we didn't have so this is the average of 3 trials. In between each trial, we would completely flush the system, clean the system, take all the solids out, take out all the fish, and refill it with fresh municipal water. So we were starting with a fresh slate. And so this is the final concentration of these nutrients minus the initial concentration of these nutrients. And what we found was it seemed there was the only statistical significance was that I'm going to talk about today was with the phosphorus and the sodium. The nitrogen or the nitrate in the water did seem to increase with our foods compared to the commercial foods, but it wasn't statistically significant. There was a little bit too much noise there. The phosphorus was significant, so there was it lined up. We go right back. It increased with increasing amount of phosphorus in the feed. Calcium showed that similar trend, but it wasn't statistically significant. And magnesium also showed a similar trend to what was in the feed, but it wasn't significant. And the sodium was significant. So the fish feed that we got, the commercial feed we got, had higher sodium in the feed, and that higher sodium did translate to higher sodium in the water. So another interesting thing we found, so the electrical conductivity in the water after 3 weeks was higher with the 2 feeds that we designed compared to the commercial feed. It got up around 0.6, which is a good kind of place to keep your system at, depending on who you ask. But that was significantly different. And then we did the growth trial. So for this growth trial, we used the baby koi, which we had bred on site. So they were about a year old when we started this. And we started with koi. We filled up the 9 tanks with koi that were about 16 to 18 grams. And we fed them, each tank either only got flowering feed, vegetative feed, or the commercial feed. And after 4 weeks, we saw statistical significance in the difference in growth rates. And then we grew them all the way through. Generally, for these types of trials, you want to grow them and grow the fish out until they're about 3 times bigger than they were when you started. So we did that it took us about 12 weeks, and the feed conversion ratio, so that's the amount of food you have to put in. So the grams of food you put in to get a gram of weight added to your fish. So for the flowering feed, they grew really well. Basically, for every gram of fish food we gave them, we grew a gram of fish. And the vegetative was pretty close to that. At about 1.14 grams of feed would give you a gram of fish. And the commercial was lower. So they were growing slower on the commercial fish feed than they were on ours, for the babies at least. And this is interesting just because, say you were looking to grow, and we were using koi, so say you're looking to grow out butterfly koi for resale. So you want to take them in when they're little, grow them up until they're big, and sell them. You buy them for $3-5 a fish, and you sell them for $20 a fish. If you're using a feed that they grow faster on, then you can turn over your fish faster, and that's good from a cost perspective and from economics perspective. So our koi, they went from 20 grams to 80 grams on our flowering feed in 12 weeks, which is great. And this is completely anecdotal, not scientific at all, no error bars. They liked our feed better. They liked the fish. They really, really liked the flowering feed, and they liked the vegetative feed quite a bit. but definitely more than the commercial feed, and that was in both trials. So we're always trying to make our fish happy. So we're happy that we have something they consider a treat now on site. And so just overarching themes from this, the fish feed can impact the nutrient generation in terms of your overall electrical conductivity, and you will see an impact from if you're using koi. I'll hedge this a bit. If you're using koi in a system that has clarifiers instead of a system that removes the solids immediately, you will see, if there's more phosphorus in your food, you can probably expect to see more phosphorus in your water when you're trying to choose which fish feed is best for you to purchase. And the same thing can be said for sodium. If you don't want too much sodium buildup in your system, which can cause issues with plants uptaking different nutrients, if you can find a feed which has a lower sodium content, you might be better off. And also, I mean, if we had run these trials for longer, we might have gotten to a point where the other nutrients were significant. But this is just the starting phase. So where we're going from here is we hope to trial this food in the commercial system and see if that increased phosphorus and that decreased sodium plays out at the commercial level, like it did in the small scale level with that feed trial unit. And so I always talk fast. I've only been talking for I don't even know what time it is, but I think I still have some time. So I'm going to keep going unless somebody waves at me to slow down or to stop talking, then I'm out of time. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Aqualitas. So we are located in the South Shore of Nova Scotia. This is an aerial picture of the industrial park that we're in. It's an absolutely lovely view. We get seals in the spring and the fall in our little harbor here. Going after the herring, so that's always fun to see when you're on your walk into work from the parking lot. We won the Cannabis Cup this year, the Grow Up Cannabis Cup for our Queen's Sangria flower. That was a pretty big deal. We produce a wide variety of SKUs. We have dried flower, which is the majority that we sell, but we also have pre-rolls. We have vapes, we have oils, we have rosin, and we have our gummies, which are definitely my favorite product that we make. And in terms of distribution, we are in all Canadian provinces except currently Manitoba, and we are in one territory. If you are a medical patient, we ship to medical patients all over the country. If you're interested in joining our medical platform, you can contact the client care team at aqualitas.ca, and they'll walk you through the process if you want to register with us as a medical patient. Canada only, I'm sorry. And this is our social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And we have different brands. So our medical brand is Aqualitas, and that's at Aqualitas Inc. Our recreational brand is Reef Organic, and our kind of collaborative brand that we do with micro growers trying to help them bring their product to market is Current, and that's at Current Cannabis. And here's a video that will probably crash PowerPoint. Maybe not. Oh, it worked. And that is a baby koi in an egg. I show this at pretty much every presentation. So if you've seen one of my presentations before, you've probably seen this. You can see his little heart beating and tail and big old eyes. And that was 2 days after the eggs were fertilized and a day before they hatched, because koi do everything rapid fire. It's much quicker than something like salmon, which takes 6 weeks from fertilization to hatch usually, or longer. So are there any questions?
Or let me look in chat here. Wes, I think your mic's open. Does anybody have any questions in chat that didn't ask a question already? Trying to see if there's any questions. I think a lot of people are just absorbing your database. A lot of people are saying it looked pretty great in chat.
It's a lot of data, but it is, hopefully it'll be useful. At least if you're a grad student about to start your master's or your PhD, it should be useful. Help you figure out what you have to do for your literature review, for your proposal and your defense or your comprehensive exam.
Someone asked if your PhD is available.
It's not done yet. I'm hoping to graduate next fall, but it is currently not completed. I have a lot more statistics to do.
You gave a great presentation last year on some side-by-sides between the regular water and aquaponic nutrients and super soil. Is there any other interesting things you've learned in the last year aside from the presentation that you showed us here that you're able to talk about?
One thing I did a deep dive on our microbial results, and I think somebody else mentioned that you had said this before, but our microbial side by side cannabis and that was watered aquaponically or that was irrigated with municipal water, the aquaponics plants did better. They had lower numbers of just about everything. Now that wasn't a controlled replicates. That's just an observational study, but we did it a couple times, and every time it was lower when you were using the aquaponics irrigation compared to just straight municipal water. So I think that's an interesting thing, and if somebody's looking for a project, and I would love to see someone prove that out. But so that I think was super interesting. We're looking at a whole bunch of R&D hopefully in the next year or two of trying to commercialize this fish feed, get it to that commercial scale, see if it works for us to improve some yields. And we are completely off commercial nutrients now. We have our living soil, and we have our aquaponics irrigation, and we have the nutrient supplement we make from digesting the fish solids, and so we don't use any commercial fertilizers anymore, which was really exciting. And that was from we got some support through an industrial research assistance program grant to figure that all out and get it to the commercial scale. So that was really good. Very successful in the last year. And the other we have koi. If anybody in Atlantic Canada would like to purchase some koi, we were very successful in our first breeding round, and we have a bunch of them, like several thousand. So if if anybody needs some koi, they're very cute. They've been hand raised. They'll take the pellets right out of your fingers. And we got some butterfly koi. We have some koi with regular fins, and they're right cute. I'm very fond of them. So if anybody's looking for koi in Atlantic Canada, we can probably deliver. But in terms of looking forward, I'd really like to get into some more research on the driving forces behind, why is the terpenes are higher, the cannabinoids are higher, what is driving that, try and figure it out. And always working on increasing yields and potencies, and maxing out the genetic potential of each different cultivar. So hopefully I have some more neat stuff for you next year. I really like coming to this conference and chatting here. So hopefully I'll be able to do it next year as well. And if there's any more questions, feel free to contact me, or if you have any to ask, I can answer them now, but always happy to chat.
Yeah, the other question is from chat. With all the flawed data entry, how do we discern what's important and practical? I think that's kind of the purpose of what you built, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's hard to tell. It's basically you can look at everything and try and find trends. If the question has been asked 5 times and 5 different people have come to a similar answer, even if they weren't doing the best reporting, you can say, it is fairly likely that those results are correct. I think moving towards, more consistent guidelines, and I'm working with the Aquaponics Association on this, like recommended materials and method, like this is how you set up a materials and methods section for an aquaponics article. That should, having some standardization in that should should help improve having all the data available so you can flag which articles are going to help you or help what your research or your commercial system, and then you can go and look at the articles more deeply, because you don't want to just go off the spreadsheet. You should read the source articles as well to get a full understanding of what they were doing and the author's interpretations of the numbers that I put into the spreadsheets, and that should help you get a better idea about what's useful, what's the likely causes of things. Generally speaking, there are some meta-analyses that look at a whole bunch of data that come to the conclusion. Like there was one recently about comparing aquaponics to hydroponics, and they came to the conclusion that it's not a significant difference from all the articles they looked at that were comparing them side by side. That some said it was better, some said it was worse, some said it was similar. So those types of articles, when they're doing the big data analysis, those can be really useful in figuring out the truth from multiple sources. I don't know if that answers the question at all, but I hope so.
And one other question, I guess in closing here, have you done any research concerning microbial life and nutrients and fish growth?
Nothing on fish growth. It's the microbial life and plant growth is on my list. I actually have the whole thing planned out. I just need the space to run the trial. But in terms of fish growth, no, I haven't looked at that directly. I know there's some articles in the wider aquaculture literature that look at that, but mostly they're focused on the microbiome in the gut of the fish and how that impacts fish growth. And that's a really interesting kind of emerging area of research in aquaculture. But I'm sure that copies over to aquaponics as well.
The only person I know who's doing anything on the sequencing side of things is Matt Powers, who's our opening speaker tomorrow. He's doing soil stuff, but now he's doing some aquaponic sequencing and stuff as well from samples that we're getting his way. So he's the only person I know that's trying to map any of that I'm aware of currently, at least.
Yeah, there's a few articles in the spreadsheet there that have looked at genetic mapping of aquaculture systems versus aquaponic systems, and finding that the aquaponic systems are more diverse. I believe is the general outcome from those. And just looking, and there the microbiomes change based where you are in the aquaponic system. So the bugs on your media in your media bed are going to be different than what's in your biofilter, than what's in your clarifier, than what's in your fish tank. There's a lot of overlap, but there are some differences as well based on where the samples were taken from. But that is one area of research I am very, very it hurts my brain. The big math that comes with genetic markers and whatnot hurts my brain. So I'm not the best person to talk to about that. But it's super interesting, and it is also something that people are starting to look at seriously.
We had one last question. Sorry, I was muted. How do people find you? Can you give people your website and contact info again?
Yeah. So online and social media at Aqualitas Inc. or the aqualitas.ca, at Reefer Organic, reeforganic.com, or at Current Cannabis, currentcannabis.ca. That's the medical, recreational, and collaborative brands. If you have any questions about each of those, you can reach out. I'm generally not very active on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, but I am on LinkedIn every once in a while. So if you want to reach out to me directly, you can do it through there. And I think I had my email at the start of the presentation as well. Maybe.
If you need our email too, you can always contact me and I can get you to as well.
Yeah. So that's my school email, danielle.maitland@dell.ca. But yeah, thanks for listening, and hopefully I didn't bore you all to death with spreadsheets.
I really
Thanks for coming in,
appreciate it.
Shane. No, sorry,
I always,
Paul.
always look forward to your presentation each year. So thank you so much for coming.
Well, I look forward to watching everybody else, and I'll see you in an hour for the commercial panel.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Please support these companies. They took the time to educate us during this conference. If you're looking for more education on aquaponic cannabis, please consider the Aquaponic Cannabis Masterclass at apmjclass.com, featuring over 7 days of in-depth, hands-on educational content with Marty Waddell and Stephen Reisner as your guides through the aquaponic cannabis universe. We'll cover everything from construction of large commercial facilities, home-sized systems, backyard systems, nutrients, pest control, diseases, everything you can think of, and so much more. So be sure to check that out at apmjclass.com. And if you're looking for aquaponic cannabis or living soil pest control courses, please check out thepestclass.com, where we have a huge in-depth course on pest control, how to make your own biocontrols, as well as in-depth guides and identification guides for a whole slew of different pests that you might encounter in your aquaponics garden. And it's not strictly just geared towards cannabis, it's also geared towards vegetables as well. So be sure to check that out if it's something you think you might need to improve in your education.